Hi, I'm Robert Horton. You know me as the programmer historian in residence at Scarecrow Video. I'm also a member of the National Society of Film Critics. Once again, I'm happy to be back leading Scarecrow Academy, an online discussion group presented by the nonprofit Scarecrow Video in Seattle. This is our fourth year of Scarecrow Academy. This year we're focusing on the art in sci-fi, science fiction, and the director, which looks at 10 classics of the science fiction film through the emphasis on the art of directing. You do not have to have attended any of our previous sessions in order to attend this one. The series is free. It takes place on Saturday afternoons at 2 p.m. Pacific time online. Go to the Scarecrow Academy page if you're not there already, find the link, and Scarecrow will send you back an email that will allow you to sign up and join us via Zoom on Saturdays. Our semester continues on Saturday, April 16th, with a conversation about the 1986 film The Fly, directed by David Cronenberg. I will introduce the film and director here because there's a camera rolling, so why not? And I hope you'll join us on Saturday. The Fly is, of course, a remake of a 1958 film that is pretty much unforgettable if you see it in childhood. That movie is based on a short story published the year before by George Langelaan, or is it Georges Langelaan? He was born in Paris, but apparently lived in England, I think, for most of his life. Anyway, he was also a spy during World War II, along with his literary career. The story involves a scientist whose experiments in teleporting, that is, in moving physical objects intact from one port to another port across space, go amiss when he transports himself without noticing that a housefly has gotten into the telepod with him, resulting in a crisscrossing of their genetic makeup. The 1986 film, written by Charles Edward Pogue and David Cronenberg, was produced by Mel Brooks's production company. This was not too long after Brooks had elevated David Lynch to the director's chair of a big studio production for the first time, The Elephant Man, so Brooks was up to that kind of stuff at this point. Cronenberg had actually already graduated to that level. You could say he'd made the Stephen King adaptation, The Dead Zone, in 1983. Still, The Fly represented the most visible film project yet for someone who had begun his career in cheap Canadian horror films. Cronenberg was born in Toronto in 1943, studied science and literature in college, and began making very low-budget short films and features. Oddly, his Canadian collaborators included the future director of Ghostbusters, Ivan Reitman, who acted as producer on a couple of Cronenberg's films from the 70s, Shivers, also known as They Came From Within, and Rabid. So Cronenberg was already known as a purveyor of a certain kind of brainy horror film, as evidenced by movies such as Scanners and The Brood and Videodrome, when The Fly came along. And we should say that The Fly is a horror film. Specifically a monster movie in the tradition of that genre. Even though we're including it in our science fiction series, it does cross genres in that sense. The horror aspects are really operatic, and I think there are some echoes of the Phantom of the Opera in its situation, I think deliberately so. As it happens, the composer Howard Shore, who has worked on most of Cronenberg's films, eventually did develop an opera based on The Fly, which Cronenberg directed for the stage in 2008. The Fly is a blend of the outrageous and the erudite, with an actual love story at its center. Cronenberg cast Jeff Goldblum and Gina Davis, who were romantically involved at the time, two offbeat actors who could bring humor to the material. And this is surely one reason the love story is convincing. Also convincing are the film's special effects, including the Oscar-winning makeup effects by Chris Wallace, who had engineered the little beasties in Gremlins a couple of years before this. It may seem strange, probably does, that a movie so explicitly and horribly gory in its effects and horror is also very affecting as a human story. But I think it's key to the film's success that Cronenberg goes all the way with his grotesque images, not just alluding to them, but making them explicit. There's a scene where Goldblum's scientist character, who's already begun mutating, is alone in his bathroom, and he's realizing that his fingernails are, starting to peel off. And he says something like, "Is this how it starts?" Which Cronenberg has said is key to the film's metaphor for what happens to people when they change, and specifically when they age. In that sense, the movie understands that to be human is to be grotesque in so many ways. The film has often been interpreted as being a metaphor for the age of AIDS, for what happens when illness changes your body and the effect this has not just on the afflicted, but on people around them. Illness and body change are common themes in Cronenberg's work, although he has said that he was not specifically thinking of The Fly as a way to investigate feelings about the effect of AIDS, that he actually was thinking about aging itself, which you can hear in certain dialogue references. But he agrees that it's very understandable. People would view it through the lens of the AIDS crisis. When I brought the critic Andrew Sarris to Seattle in the late 1980s, he spoke of his admiration for The Fly and the subtext of AIDS. But he also said there are a lot of subtexts there. So I think you can see how a movie like this is available for many different readings. There's one thing that is striking about the movie. It is simple enough to be read in all these different ways, even if it is very busy and dense on the level of dialogue and ideas and special effects. There are really only 3 main characters, almost no significant supporting ones, and the number of locations is also extremely limited, all of which adds to the hothouse nature of the experience, which is useful for a mad scientist movie. If you get too far away from that hothouse, there's a risk that it will all start to seem ridiculous. Cronenberg's fascination with the ways technology has interacted with or changed the human body is well served with this material, obviously, but he also extends it beyond Goldblum's experiment so that the film also includes pregnancy and its complications, which leads us to the observation that this is one of those rare mad scientist movies in which the energy of the film is not obsessively focused on the fascinating man doing the experimentation, but also on the woman who documents the experiment. This is decidedly not a movie in which the female lead is merely the love interest or plot device for the man in the story. And in fact, the Geena Davis character is our point of view figure, one who experiences her own tragic journey in the course of the film. And by the way, one of those subtexts that Sarris might have been talking about was the movie's baleful eye for outmoded ideas of masculinity, which is a very consistent note during this film, and is embodied not just by the character of Geena Davis's ex-boyfriend, played by John Getz, but also by Brundlefly, the hybrid human-insect monstrosity, who might talk about becoming the first insect politician, but who also behaves like an insane and possessive lover when things go awry. We'll talk about these things and maybe even compare the original film to this one. They share only one line of dialogue, I think, the plaintive phrase, "Help me," when we gather on Saturday, April 16th, for an online Scarecrow Academy conversation about David Cronenberg's classic science fiction film, The Fly.